A tiny formatting detail on a single piece of paper can actually carry a massive amount of cultural weight. We're talking about a space no bigger than a postage stamp, but honestly, it has the power to completely dictate the trajectory of a person's career. So let's just dive right into this explainer. We're going to break down the stark differences and some pretty massive recent evolutions in global hiring cultures. Specifically, we're looking at how different countries handle applicant photographs and how societies are trying to fundamentally rewire the job application process to, actually level the playing field.
Think about it for a second. Would you put your photo on a resume? I mean, for some of you watching, the immediate answer is a hard, absolute no way. It feels wrong, maybe even a little risky. But for others, you might be scratching your head thinking, well, how else are they going to know who I am? It's just a picture, right? Depending entirely on where you live and work, attaching a headshot to your application is either an expected, strict cultural requirement or a massive professional taboo. It's almost never just a neutral choice.
Section 1. The Resume Photo Divide. Section 2. U.S. Applicant Photo Rules. To really understand this universal problem of implicit bias in hiring and how institutions actually try to solve it, we need to look at a strictly regulated recruitment environment. Over in the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, functions kind of like the old guard of neutrality. They put out this official, highly specific guidance that heavily restricts employers from asking for applicant photographs. And why? Well, because historically, visual identifiers have been a huge catalyst for outright discrimination, whether that's based on race, age, gender, you name it. In the U.S. corporate system, seeing a candidate's face before reviewing their qualifications is seen as an immediate, massive legal liability. If a company asks for a photo, they are basically opening themselves up to lawsuits over prohibited employment practices. So the system deliberately creates a legal blind spot. It forces hiring managers to evaluate the raw data, the experience, the skills, before the human brain even has a chance to formulate any of those snap judgments based on appearance.
Section 3, Korean Fair Hiring Act. Now, let's flip the script and see the massive cultural contrast when we look at South Korea. While those U.S. guidelines deliberately block visual identifiers to ensure fairness, traditional Korean hiring culture historically took the exact opposite approach, like completely the opposite. In the past, Korean applications didn't just ask for a high-quality professional photo. They demanded extensive, deeply personal details right up front. We're talking about things that would literally make a U.S. HR department panic. It was completely standard practice for a company hiring for a typical desk job to require a candidate's height, their weight, their marital status, and get this, even their blood type. You are routinely judged on the face of the resume, right alongside your academic credentials. It was an environment where looking the part was literally baked into the application form, which obviously created a massive hurdle for anyone who didn't fit a very specific traditional mold. But to combat these deeply ingrained traditional expectations, South Korea actually took decisive legal action. The breaking point really hit when younger generations and labor advocates started heavily criticizing this appearance-based screening. They argued, and rightly so, that it crippled true meritocracy. So in response, the government implemented the Fair Hiring Procedure Act, and honestly, this was a monumental shift. It wasn't just a gentle suggestion to companies to, be a little more open-minded. No, it acted as a powerful legal catalyst that officially mandated fairer recruitment procedures. The law actively sought to overwrite decades of tradition, penalizing companies that kept demanding unnecessary physical or personal data. It represents this really fascinating moment where legislation had to step in to manually reprogram a country's corporate culture. Section 4, Public Sector Blind Recruitment. According to some really comprehensive reporting from the Korea Herald, this new frontier of fairness isn't just some theory being debated in legal circles anymore. It's actually happening. It's taken the form of strict, blind recruitment policies that are rolling out aggressively across the Korean public sector. What's absolutely crucial here is that the government is stepping up to lead by example. By forcing public institutions to adopt these radically neutral applications, the state is actively creating a massive test case for the private sector. They're fundamentally changing the architecture of the job application itself to force hiring managers to look only at what actually matters. They're proving that you really don't need to know a candidate's physical profile to make a great hire. So how does this actually work? Well, they're systematically stripping away 3 very specific pillars of bias from the application process. Step 1, removing the photos. This attacks appearance bias directly, completely shutting down those snap judgments about age, gender, or conventional attractiveness. Step 2, removing hometowns. In a lot of cultures, and definitely in Korea, regional rivalries and geographic stereotypes can run deep.
So cutting out the hometown removes the chance that a manager might favor someone just because they grew up in the same province. And step 3, removing family backgrounds. Historically, knowing what a candidate's parents did for a living was this glaring signal of social class, wealth, or industry connections. It pretty much left the door wide open for nepotism. By tearing down these 3 pillars of the traditional resume, the spotlight is forced entirely onto skills, experience, and capability. It is a massive, deliberate, structural teardown of the old way of doing things.
Section 5. Future of Fair Hiring.
As we watch Korea actively evolve its legislation to match modern fairness standards, it really forces us to look at the future of global business norms as a whole. And honestly, it all boils down to this one ultimate question. Is true objectivity in hiring ever fully achievable? Whether we're looking through the lens of the US EEOC guidelines with their strict liability protections or South Korea's sweeping new public sector blind recruitment push, we've got to ask ourselves a tough question. Will removing the face, the hometown, or the family background from a resume ever completely eliminate bias from what is, at its core, an inherently human process? Or does bias just find a new place to hide in the interview room? It's an ongoing evolution for sure, and one that forces all of us to question exactly how fairly we are judging the person sitting across the table. What do you think?